Rain pattered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sovereign, a five-star hotel nestled in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, a testament to the opulence that awaited those who could afford its astronomical room rates. Outside, a modest black sedan pulled up to the entrance, barely noticed amongst the parade of Bentleys and Lamborghinis that typically graced the circular driveway. A woman stepped out, dressed in faded jeans, an oversized gray hoodie, and dark sunglasses. Her chestnut hair was tucked into a messy bun, and she carried a weathered leather backpack over one shoulder. Nothing about her screamed celebrity, which was precisely the point. After 3 grueling months on set, Sandra Bullock wanted nothing more than anonymity and a quiet place to decompress before heading home. As she pushed through the revolving doors, the cacophony of the city faded, replaced by the soft classical music piped through hidden speakers. The lobby bustled with activity, bellhops wheeling luggage, concierges attending to guests, and a cluster of Japanese tourists posing for photos beside an enormous floral arrangement. At the front desk, a young woman named Veronica Matthews stood perfectly poised in her tailored black suit. With her platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon and makeup applied with surgical precision, she embodied the hotel's commitment to perfection. At 26, she had clawed her way into this coveted position at the Sovereign, the most prestigious hotel in her company's portfolio. Her Instagram feed was carefully curated to showcase her brushes with fame and fortune, though these encounters were often embellished for maximum impact. What happened next would leave everyone completely shocked and serve as a reminder that we never truly know who we might encounter in our daily lives. If you're enjoying this story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to follow for more incredible celebrity encounters coming tomorrow. The encounter begins. Sandra approached the reception desk, removing her sunglasses and tucking them into her hoodie pocket. Despite her casual attire, there was something inherently graceful about her movements, a quiet confidence that years in front of the camera had instilled. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice warm but subdued. "I have a reservation under Bullock." Veronica glanced up from her computer screen, her gaze sweeping over Sandra's casual outfit with barely concealed disdain. The Sovereign's typical clientele arrived in designer clothes with an entourage in tow. This woman looked like she had wandered in from the street. "Do you have identification?" Veronica asked, her tone clipped. Sandra nodded, producing her driver's license and credit card from her backpack. As she handed them over, Veronica's perfectly manicured fingers accepted them with visible reluctance, as though touching something distasteful. Veronica hummed, examining the license and then looking back at Sandra with skepticism. "Sandra Bullock? That's interesting." Sandra offered a small smile. "I get that a lot. I'm sure you do," Veronica replied, her voice dripping with condescension. She typed something into her computer, her acrylic nails clicking against the keyboard. "I see the reservation, but there seems to be an issue. The presidential suite is reserved for VIP guests only." Sandra raised an eyebrow but maintained her composure. "My assistant made the booking last week. I was told everything was confirmed." "Well, there must have been some miscommunication," Veronica said with a tight smile. "We simply can't accommodate just anyone in our premium suites without proper verification." Behind Sandra, a line was beginning to form. A middle-aged woman with expensive jewelry clutched her husband's arm, whispering something that made him frown in Sandra's direction. 2 businessmen in tailored suits checked their watches impatiently. "Perhaps," Veronica continued, her voice loud enough for others to hear, "you'd be more comfortable at the Marriott down the street? They have much more accessible accommodations." A flush crept up Sandra's neck, but her expression remained neutral. Years in Hollywood had taught her to weather public humiliation with grace. "I understand your concern for the hotel's reputation, but I assure you the reservation is legitimate. Would you mind double-checking with your manager?" Veronica's smile tightened further. "Our manager is currently in a meeting. I'm fully authorized to handle these situations, and in my judgment, there appears to be a case of identity confusion here." Tension escalates. The lobby had grown quieter now, with several guests openly watching the exchange. Sandra became acutely aware of the eyes upon her, the whispers behind cupped hands. This was exactly the kind of attention she had hoped to avoid. "Look," Sandra said quietly, leaning closer to the desk. "I've had a long day. I'm not looking for special treatment. I just want to check into my room and get some rest." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Miss Bullock, if that's really who you are, surely you understand that the sovereign has standards to maintain. Our clientele expects a certain environment." She gestured vaguely at Sandra's attire. "And frankly, you don't seem to fit that environment." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Sandra took a deep breath, centering herself before responding. "I'm curious," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "What does fitting into this environment look like to you?" Veronica seemed taken aback by the question but recovered quickly. "Well, for starters, our guests typically arrive appropriately dressed. Designer labels, proper attire. Not," she glanced pointedly at Sandra's hoodie, "looking like they just rolled out of bed." Sandra nodded thoughtfully. "And you believe that a person's worth can be determined by the label sewn into their clothes?" "This isn't about worth," Veronica snapped, becoming defensive. "It's about respecting the establishment and the other guests who pay good money to stay here." "I see," Sandra replied. "And how much does a night in the presidential suite cost?" Veronica's mouth twitched. $15,000 per night. "And you believe I can't afford that because of how I'm dressed?" Several people in the lobby had given up any pretense of not listening. An elderly couple seated on a nearby sofa exchanged meaningful glances. A young man at the concierge desk had stopped mid-sentence, his attention captured by the unfolding drama. "It's not just about affordability," Veronica insisted, her voice rising slightly. "The Sovereign isn't merely a hotel, it's an experience. Our guests understand that. They respect it." Sandra's expression softened. "I understand your position truly. You're protecting something you believe in. But I wonder if you've considered that true luxury isn't about exclusion, but about how we make people feel, regardless of appearances." Veronica scoffed. "That's a convenient philosophy for someone who clearly doesn't belong in a place like this. I've met Sandra Bullock at a charity event last year, and I can assure you she wouldn't be caught dead dressed like—" A deep voice interrupted from behind Sandra. "Actually, that's not true." An unexpected ally. Every head in the lobby turned toward the source of the voice. Standing near the entrance was a tall man with shoulder-length dark hair, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. Despite his casual appearance, he carried himself with unmistakable presence. Keanu Reeves. He walked toward the reception desk, his movements fluid and purposeful. The whispers grew louder and several people reached for their phones. "Sandy," he greeted, giving Sandra a warm hug. "Thought I'd find you here." Sandra's tension visibly melted away as she returned the embrace. "Keanu, I didn't know you were in town. Just wrapped filming yesterday. Got your message about staying here and thought I'd surprise you." He turned his attention to Veronica, whose face had drained of color. "Is there a problem with the reservation?" Veronica swallowed hard. "Mr. Reeves, there seems to be some confusion." "There's no confusion," Keanu said, his voice gentle but firm. "This is Sandra Bullock, one of the most talented actresses of our generation, my dear friend, and from what I understand, a guest at this hotel." The lobby had fallen completely silent. Even the classical music seemed to have paused in anticipation. "But she doesn't look like," Veronica began, then stopped herself, realizing the precariousness of her position. "Like what?" Keanu asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Like someone worthy of respect?" Veronica flushed deep red. "No, that's not what I meant. You know," Keanu continued, leaning casually against the reception desk, "I've always admired Sandy for her ability to move through the world without needing to announce herself. It takes a special kind of confidence to be comfortable in your own skin, doesn't it?" The question hung in the air, not accusatory, but thought-provoking. Veronica stared at her computer screen, unable to meet his gaze. "I once showed up to an interview in clothes I'd slept in," Keanu continued conversationally. "The journalist wrote an entire piece about how I was challenging Hollywood norms. The truth was, I just felt comfortable, and I believe that's a right everyone should have." Sandra watched Keanu with a mixture of gratitude and amusement. After decades in the industry together, From their chemistry and speed to their enduring friendship off-screen, he still managed to surprise her with his thoughtfulness. The thing about judging people based on appearances, Keanu went on, is that we never know what journeys they've been on that day. Maybe they've been filming for 12 hours straight. Maybe they've been visiting sick children at a hospital and didn't want to draw attention to themselves. Maybe they just find hoodies really comfortable. He smiled at this last suggestion, and a few nervous laughs echoed through the lobby. The revelation. A distinguished older man in an impeccable suit emerged from an elevator and approached the desk with a concerned expression. "Miss Matthews, is everything all right? I was informed there might be a situation requiring attention." "Mr. Harrington," Veronica stammered, recognizing the hotel manager. "I was just explaining our policies to these guests." Mr. Harrington's eyes widened as he recognized Sandra and Keanu. "Miss Bullock, Mr. Reeves," he said, extending his hand. "It's an honor to have you both at the Sovereign. I hope there hasn't been any inconvenience." "There was a slight misunderstanding about my reservation," Sandra explained graciously. "Nothing that can't be resolved." Mr. Harrington turned to Veronica, his expression stern. "Miss Matthews, please prepare the presidential suite for Miss Bullock immediately. And Mr. Reeves, will you be joining us as well? We have the ambassador suite available on the same floor." "That would be great, thanks," Keanu replied. Veronica's fingers trembled as she typed, the reality of her misjudgment crashing down upon her. The prestigious job she had worked so hard to secure now hung in the balance, all because she had failed to see beyond the surface. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "I didn't recognize. I shouldn't have assumed." Sandra regarded her thoughtfully. "You know what's interesting about Hollywood? We spend our lives pretending to be other people, but sometimes that's when we're most authentic. The characters I play often remind me that everyone has a story worth listening to." She paused, then added gently, "Even the ones in hoodies." Veronica nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Your keys, Miss Bullock," she said, placing 2 key cards on the counter. "And I truly am sorry." The wisdom moment. As Mr. Harrington personally escorted them toward the elevators, leaving a mortified Veronica behind, Sandra laid a hand on his arm. "Mr. Harrington, a moment, please." She walked back to the reception desk, where Veronica was desperately trying to compose herself. "Veronica," Sandra said, reading her name tag, "I want you to know something." Veronica looked up, bracing herself for a justified reprimand, or perhaps even a demand for her termination. "We all make mistakes," Sandra continued. "The measure of a person isn't in never falling, but in how they rise after a fall." I judged you so harshly," Veronica admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, you did," Sandra agreed. "And now you have a choice about what to learn from it." "I could lose my job over this." Sandra considered this. "Would you like me to speak with your manager?" Veronica's eyes widened in surprise. "After how I treated you? Why would you do that?" "Because sometimes people deserve second chances, because growth requires opportunity, and because I think you'll be a much better receptionist now that you've learned this lesson." Keanu, who had quietly returned to Sandra's side, added, "The most valuable wisdom often comes from our most uncomfortable moments." "I don't deserve your kindness," Veronica said, wiping away a tear. "Kindness isn't about what's deserved," Sandra replied. "It's about what's needed. And sometimes what we all need is to be reminded that our worst moments don't define us." By now, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, watching the exchange with rapt attention. Among them was a young girl, perhaps 10 years old, clutching a notebook to her chest. With childlike directness, she approached Sandra. "Are you really Sandra Bullock?" she asked, eyes wide. Sandra knelt down to the child's level. "I am. What's your name?" "Emma. I want to be an actress like you someday." Sandra smiled. "Well, Emma, if you want to be an actress, here's my first piece of advice. Remember that the most important role you'll ever play is yourself, and playing that role authentically is what makes all the other roles possible." Emma nodded solemnly, as though receiving sacred wisdom. "Can I have your autograph?" As Sandra signed the child's notebook, Keanu engaged in conversation with an elderly couple who had been watching the entire scene unfold. His genuine interest in their stories about their 50 years of marriage drew a small gathering of its own. In that moment, The lobby of the Sovereign transformed from a showcase of material luxury into something far more valuable, a space where genuine human connection transcended surface judgments. The aftermath. Mr. Harrington approached Veronica, his expression grave. "Ms. Matthews, once our VIP guests are settled, I'd like to see you in my office." "Actually," Sandra interjected, "I was hoping to share some thoughts with you about Ms. Matthews if you have a moment." The manager looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, Miss Bullock." They stepped aside for a brief, private conversation. Though their words weren't audible to the lobby at large, Veronica could see Mr. Harrington's expression shifting from sternness to thoughtful consideration. When they returned, Mr. Harrington addressed Veronica directly. "Ms. Matthews, Miss Bullock has given me a perspective I hadn't considered. While today's incident was serious and not in keeping with our standards, she believes, and I'm inclined to agree, that it presents an opportunity for growth rather than punishment." Veronica looked between them in disbelief. "You'll be transferring to our training department for the next month," he continued. "Ms. Bullock has suggested that your experience today could be valuable in teaching other staff about the dangers of snap judgments and the importance of treating all guests with equal respect." "Thank you," Veronica managed, her voice thick with emotion. "I won't let either of you down." As Sandra and Keanu finally made their way to the elevators, the lobby burst into spontaneous applause. It wasn't the adulation of fans for celebrities, but rather the recognition of a moment of genuine humanity, a reminder that beneath the glamour and beyond the judgments, connection was still possible. In the elevator, Keanu turned to Sandra with a grin. "Just like old times, huh? You and me against the world." Sandra laughed, the tension of the day finally dissipating. "Some things never change, though I think you enjoyed playing the hero a little too much." "Not the hero," he corrected. "Just a friend who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "Speaking of which, how did you really know I was here?" Keanu shrugged. "Your assistant called mine. Said you might need some company after that intense final scene you shot. Thought I'd surprise you." "Perfect timing as always, Reeves." The elevator doors opened to reveal the penthouse floor where their respective suites awaited. Before they parted ways, Keanu turned serious for a moment. "You know what you did down there? Giving her a second chance. That's the real victory today." Sandra smiled. "We've both been in this business long enough to know that everyone deserves the opportunity to rewrite their script." Epilogue. 3 months later, Sandra returned to the Sovereign for a charity gala. As she entered the lobby, she was greeted by a familiar face, Veronica, now wearing a badge that identified her as a training coordinator. "Ms. Bullock," Veronica said, her demeanor transformed. "Welcome back to the Sovereign." "How's the new position?" Sandra asked. "Life-changing," Veronica replied sincerely. "I start every training session with our story. Minus names, of course. The day I almost lost everything by judging a book by its cover. And what's the response been? Surprisingly positive. It turns out, most people can relate to making snap judgments. The hard part is admitting it." She hesitated, then added, "I've been meaning to thank you properly, not just for saving my job, but for teaching me something I couldn't have learned any other way." Sandra smiled. "Sometimes the most important lessons come packaged in our most embarrassing moments." "I've learned to look for the person, not the packaging," Veronica said. "And I've never been happier." As Sandra continued toward the ballroom where the gala was being held, she reflected on the strange alchemy of human connection, how conflict could transform into growth, how judgment could give way to understanding, and how even in the most unlikely circumstances, people could surprise you with their capacity for change. That evening, as she took the stage to present a humanitarian award to Keanu for his years of anonymous philanthropy, she shared this thought with the audience. True luxury isn't found in exclusive spaces or behind velvet ropes. It's found in moments of genuine connection, in second chances offered and accepted, and in the courage to see beyond the surface to the humanity we all share. The story of the receptionist who humiliated Sandra Bullock quickly became Hollywood legend, not because of the humiliation, but because of what happened afterward. It served as a reminder that in a world obsessed with image, sometimes the most powerful statement is showing who you really are, hoodie and all. And as for Keanu's shocking reaction, perhaps the most shocking thing was that it wasn't shocking at all to those who truly knew him. Just another day of quiet kindness from a man who had always understood that fame was an opportunity not for special treatment, but for making a difference in the moments that mattered most. The luxury of the sovereign, with all its marble and crystal, paled in comparison to the true opulence on display that day. Compassion, forgiveness, and the simple recognition of our shared humanity, the most exclusive amenities of all, yet freely available to anyone brave enough to offer them.